Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it.
Right, you tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to
Good evening, folks. This is Diamond with the Oppenheimer Ranch Project, bringing you another edition of the Inconvenient Truth, prepping for the grand solar minimum. I'm sorry about that delay there. I didn't hear the intro, folks. We're going to have an excellent show tonight. Joining us tonight on the air is my partner, Leah Shaper, and our special guest, Dr. Regina Nelson, and her partner in crime, who I hung out on the river with today, Michael Browning. Now, they're going to tell us more about themselves in a moment, and today's show, The Inconvenient Truth, is going to be about cannabis medicine, cannabis science, and the nonsense involved with misinformation around cannabinoids, cannabinoid research, fake pot, and other topics. So Dr. Regina Nelson is the author with Michael Edward Browning, contributor of Time for the Talk, talking to your doctor or patient about medical cannabis. Now, guys, many people around the world are wising up to the lies in the last many decades, and they're seeing the direct benefit from exploring cannabis therapy. Now, we advocate hemp lucid on our channel because we're friends with the company owners, and CBD is an easy way to get a tiny fraction of the cannabis medicine directly to your door in all the states where pot's illegal. But we're going to be talking about the real medicine, Rick Simpson oil, full plant tincture, and all the cannabinoids that are associated with it. Because for those of you listening, if you are unaware, the human body contains something called the endocannabinoid system. Now, this is only slightly understood, and we need to do decades more research. The problem is that it's hard to come by legal pot, and it's hard to do this type of research in general. So, with any further ado, let me welcome Dr. Regina Nelson and Michael Browning to the show. Guys, can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having us.
Hey, Leah.
Awesome. Leah, are you there on the line?
I am here.
Okay, cool. Well, I don't know anything about you, Dr. Nelson, because I'm a very busy person. I really didn't have time to delve into what's going on here. I have, however, had about 2 decades worth of experience in the field of growing cannabis and cannabis medicine, simply from my experience with other growers for the use of anti-cancer properties of full plant oils, some people making tinctures, people who have the benefits of smoking different cannabinoids. And now that I live in Colorado and we're doing a little bit more scientific endeavors here, it is becoming very clear about the distinct and unique nature of the sativa versus the indica plant and how it can basically treat a whole cacophony of all of the inflammatory diseases that are out there, as well as some psychological ailments that people are being over-medicated for. So if you could give us a background on how you got here and, you know, just fill us in on the direction of your work, and we'll just all have a roundtable discussion. How does that sound?
That sounds great. Thanks, Diamond.
Awesome.
Yeah, I actually, I've been a casual cannabis user most of my adult life, and I was curious, was this really medicinal or not? So when I started out on my PhD journey in 2011, when I would let people know that I was looking at medical marijuana as an issue of social injustice, I would get such a guttural reaction from them that it just kind of solidified that I was on the right track. There was something here. And I was also sick, and I wasn't feeling really well. I was nauseous, and I was throwing up a lot. And one of the things we know about cannabis is it's really good for nausea. And so I was kind of reintroducing it after a couple of years absence and really finding a lot of just immediate relief when I ended up having a major bowel resection surgery. And what had happened while I was getting sick was my intestine was caught up in scar tissue. And I actually lost 6 feet of my small intestine. I spent nearly a month in the hospital, got out on my 48th birthday, barely 100 pounds, still super sick, trying to recover from this major life-threatening surgery. And I had just moved to New Mexico and registered as a medical cannabis patient. And though I was primarily smoking at the time, made a huge difference in the amount of pain medicine that I needed. I needed much less. I was able to control my pain. And as I learned a lot more from people pretty much like you that have been long-term growers and really came to understand the medicine and talk to more patients, and really it come to learn one thing that you've already said. We have this endogenous cannabinoid receptor system. And that to me is, I think, where we've failed on the medical movement of really pushing it, because you don't hear everybody saying that they know that yet. And the fact that each and every one of us have this endogenous receptor system, and we can benefit from this wonderful plant in so many ways as a nutritional supplement, as a food, and as a nutraceutical with very low, very little side effect and very low risk. I really, I took off, really looking at what was going on at that time. And over the years, I've come to establish a nonprofit organization, the e.s.t, or Endocannabinoid System Therapy Center. And Michael and I came to connect because his background was working with the Cannabis Film Festival and the Cannabis Film Institute. And I really think that so many patient stories now really drive home what a great need there is for this. I think Sanjay Gupta has done a good job through CNN, of all places, of really saying, hey, as a doctor, I was wrong, and here's some things we need to look at. And the story with Charlotte Figge in 2013 really changed things. It changed things for me a lot because it was the first time I saw a kid come out of a seizure on my couch with cannabis oil that I just made for myself at home. And, such an influx of people into Colorado with disabled children and who are terminally ill. It's just really kind of you stick your toe in the water in this, and it just becomes life-changing. And I think Raphael Mechoulam has said it a number of times. If this plant were discovered today, we would be all hailing it as as oh my God, this is life-changing for all of us. But because it's been vilified and criminalized for 80 years, we're still not getting to take a very good look at it. And so, with that, there's a lot of research to be done, and I'm embarking on some here shortly on sexual health and cannabis use. But I think there's, just a whole lot of things that we can look at here. So I'm really very, interested in talking to you more and finding out, what your questions are and have a discussion about this, because obviously you're very well informed.
Well, as far as the history goes, let's just go back into the geologic history. There is now research being done on the studies with the seeds of the 3 different species, and they've actually determined that proliferation of the cannabis plant throughout the northern hemisphere is done through animals. They eat the hemp, they walk or migrate large distances, and actually the digestive system of these animals allows the seed to sprout faster and make it more viable. And this is just some of the groundbreaking research that's happening in recent times since the decriminalization, which should have happened decades ago. But we all know it's the devil weed, and in fact, the #1 safest plant medicine ever discovered on Earth. Almost every other plant has side effects where the cannabis plant has never clinically killed anyone. Additionally, studies have shown that people who are chronic smokers have lower incidence of lung cancer than control groups. That means that if you chronically smoke cannabis, you will have healthier lungs than someone who just breathes air. That's what that conclusion means. Additionally, people who are chronic cigarette smokers who also smoke cannabis tend not to get lung cancer ever. It's a very interesting young field, and if we bring it all the way back, there is archaeological evidence that Ice Age man up to 11,000 years ago was actually cultivating hemp by the edge of the glacial advance. So
you've been reading John McPartland's work. He's really something. He's looked at the migration of man for millions of years and look at fossilized cannabis seeds, and absolutely, this is a plant that had it not been vilified, at the time it was vilified in the 1930s. It was the #1 agriculture crop in the world. So, we've got a whole lot of work to still do to undo the damage that this long-term prohibition has done, but we have made, some steady progress in the last, few decades.
It also sounds, Diamond, like you might have caught the cannabis conversations from May 27th.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I watched that as soon as you mentioned it. Leah, do you have anything to chime in with?
No,
sorry, Leah.
That's okay. I really appreciate the thought about, cannabis being a particularly safe plant medicine, even over potentially many other herbs. I mean, as Don mentioned, lack of side effects. And in fact, I've been thinking a lot about, various medicines, whether we're talking pharmaceuticals or herbals or cannabis. And to me, what sets cannabis apart is that not only are there zero side effects, but it really is a truly healing plant. And that sets it apart from everything else in my mind and makes it really amazing. Plus, you have all of these different endocannabinoids that address different issues in the body, and one may work better for one person and versus another. It's truly an amazing plant.
It absolutely is. And in one of the first papers I ever did in my PhD program, and it's published in my book, Theorist at Large, I compared cannabis to St. John's wort because it's not regulated by the FDA, and it's not as safe as cannabis, and it has a lot of the same side effects. You can have a euphoric response. You will relax, So, but the thing is cannabis is so much safer. And so, we have, a lot of education to do around this because, it's been unduly vilified for far too long.
But the research is in, so people can't keep saying we need more research, we need more studies, because the research has actually been funded by our tax dollars that NIDA spends overseas in Israel and other places to conduct this research, because our own scientists in America can't access the plant because of its Schedule I status.
Right.
Well, and
it's a tangled web we've wove, and everybody, that's politicians too. Well, we need more research. Well, you need to not just decriminalize, and I think that's a thing people need to look at, because while we're here in Colorado and enjoying Pagosa Springs and really thrilled last night that as adults we could walk into 4 really lovely stores here and be able to purchase cannabis safely and legally. That's not the case for most people, and the truth is it's still not really legal. It's only slightly decriminalized. We haven't really legalized anything.
Yeah, so let me tell you a little story. Michael and I were sitting on the river downtown. The dog was off the leash, and we were smoking cannabis, all breaking the law in multiple levels. And the police came back and returned the dog and told us the legal way to break the law and told us to have a wonderful day.
It was off the leash.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Well, as Coloradans like to say, weed has been legal here forever. It just wasn't official, and that's just a cultural difference, and that's about it.
Yeah, but it depends on where you're at. It depends on where you're at, because, 2 caregivers for Jack Split, who is famous for Jack's Law and passed a few years ago, recently settled to felony charges and are going to do 3 years probation because they were making cannabis oil for him in his home at the time of his death. The police in Jefferson County and others want to get cannabis out of their county. So again, on a whole for the state of Colorado, we still have issues here that we're not publicizing and addressing. And, you know, I'm in Boulder, and I feel really privileged to be there as well for the same reasons you feel privileged to be in Pagosa Springs. But it really doesn't extend throughout the entire state. When when we drive in from Kansas or Oklahoma, it takes a very long time to be able to access safe and legal medicine for most of the boundaries.
Sure. Yeah, I actually drive from Pagosa last year with a friend of mine up to Boulder to get clones. That's how far you have to drive from safe city to safe city, because it's funny. But the problem with the medicine aspect is not only that is it localized in Colorado. The problem is that this country and the world now is governed by multinational corporations. Yeah. In the form of Monsanto and the big pharma companies, which now have unlimited dollars to lobby against any cannabis medicine. They've been doing this for decades. And what's coming out now in the mainstream pharmacopoeia area is they want to break down cannabis into its 127 constituent cannabinoids and sell them each as individual drugs, researching each individually. And we know, as cannabis scientists, that it is the entourage effect, it is the multiplicity of cannabinoids interconnectedly working that cures cancer and helps people have spiritual experiences. It is not single cannabinoids like CBD or THC that is going to help the planet. Now, they are therapeutic, but it is the entourage effect we need to be studying.
Yeah. Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. We're seeing, as you said, a lot of great hemp oil products coming to market that have low ranges of THC, but they are full spectrum products. And when you're talking about what we've come to know about, like the difference between sativa and indica and these type things, we've come to learn just in the last year that really the only difference there is a terpene, myrcene, which is the smell and flavor of the plant. And now I'm starting to work with people with just terpenes, and they're having some really incredible outcomes for PTS and other things. And so I think that, we haven't even begun to understand the depth of healing this plant holds because of prohibition. But there's just a multiplicity of ways it can be used very safely. But what we've come to understand from the pharmaceutical industry and synthetic cannabinoids, we know about K2 and spice with synthetic THC, which was horrible. But just a couple years ago in a synthetic CBD trial of 14 people, 4 died in the first week. That's significant. Synthesizing this makes it less safe. And yet our government owns patents, so we see people like GW Pharmaceuticals moving very easily into space here. And while they have clinical trials to show the things we've already observed, they're trying, to take root and to take the medicine away from a lot of people because we don't have good programs all over the country.
And it's really interesting when you look at how they publicize certain aspects of cannabis research, because the doctor's gone to International Cannabinoid Research Symposium for 4 or 5 years. We're going to go here to the Netherlands here next month. And last year in Montreal, one of the things I noticed in talking to these scientists is a lot of these negative conclusions, like they'll be talking about teenage use of THC and how bad it is on the developing brain. And you look through the study and you find out they're actually using a synthesized THC, which is totally dangerous.
Right. And the other piece to this would be, I go to these, and I got to say, one of the big blessings of it is I do get to sit with people like Raphael Mechoulam and have discussions. And they're always really surprised that, when they say, well, But how does that patient dose that? So I can give them that information and be like, that little boy takes 65 milligrams of a THC-rich cannabis oil 4 times a day, whatever the case may be. But they're always stopping. They're like, well, that's a lot of THC. But yes, but in your research, you showed that this works. Well, yes. So you slowly titrate to it so they don't have a problem with euphoric effects, and it works. And they're like, well, yeah, but they find that they can't get over that euphoric hurdle. And the key piece to that is that can be managed very easily. For people who don't want to get high these days, they don't have to get high. For people who don't want to smoke, they don't have to smoke. I always introduce people initially through the use of topicals that are scared of cannabis therapy because it's so benign and has such immediate effect. But mostly, it is still trial and error on trying to figure out how this is going to work particularly for you, because we can't draw your blood yet and say, oh, you're deficient in anandamide, so you need CBD, or, whatever the case is, that you may need more THC. We just don't know these things yet.
Yeah, and speaking to this idea of pharmaceutical companies breaking down cannabinoids into, single cannabinoids, and then also doing research with synthetic versions. I mean, this to me just reeks of the modus operandi,
Greed.
Greed with corporate America. It's like, okay, well, how can we make it so that we are the only ones who can provide what you need? Well, we break it down into these individual components, and then additionally, we're going to synthesize it because we're going to tell you that's the only safe way to do that, which is totally backwards, clearly. And, that way you're dependent on us for this medicine, as usual, right? I mean, these companies do not like us depending on nature. That's just the reality.
Well, the truth is in.
We're out right now.
The jig is up.
The jig is up. We're out right now on tour for the book Time for the Talk about doctor-patient communication. Because my dissertation, as you mentioned earlier, the medical cannabis recommendation, I interviewed doctors and patients all over the country because there's a lot of obstacles in this process. And, just starting that conversation, it often puts doctors on the defense because the patient really, when you're diagnosed with something chronic or terminal, you research that and you begin to understand that. You talk to other people with that. And after a period of time, particularly when you begin looking at something like cannabis therapy out of desperation, if you don't know anything about it, you go into your doctor more informed than they are. And many doctors still don't know the words endocannabinoid system. They haven't been taught that in medical school. Yeah. So, and they don't want to use the words "I don't know." But we're doing this tour and teaching these clinician level 1 classes, but they're actually classes that we're also teaching to physicians because they're CME accredited. But I'm the first person who's been able to get that accreditation through the American Academy of Family Physicians. And that's important because it's 2018. It's 30 years after the discovery of the endocannabinoid system, and that's a major organization for physicians all over this country. And I have the first curriculum that they've accepted.
Legal precedent.
It's kind of a precedent. Wow. Oh, look, we are going to have to go in this direction. And, 30 years later, but I really come at this, I'm a PhD. I'm not an MD, but I'm a patient. And so, I've been in to educate at the clinic I go to in Boulder, and we do these kind of things, around the country. And many physicians, once they find that out, that is, game changing for them. But few will take it on themselves to go and do the research on their own. And there's a lot to know in this, and there's so many different conditions that can be affected, because what we've come to understand is that the endocannabinoid system is not just an endocrine system. It's overall our endocrine systems, our pituitary, our thyroid, our hormones, all of these things, our immune system and our central nervous system. This endocannabinoid system has effect over the signaling that all of those systems do with themselves and with the other systems. And a really great piece of research just came out this past few weeks, and it came out in Cell Journal, which is a peer-reviewed journal. And I'm really excited because we'll get to hear about this in June. But they were looking at oxytocin and its role in social behavior, and they came to find out that the cannabinoid receptors selectively recruit endocannabinoids based on the context of how you're feeling in a situation. Well, that's huge news, and that explains a lot of things around autism and around ADD and around just social anxiety and PTS. And, then we had the Sanjay Gupta special came out, and they showed basically a brain on opiates and a brain on cannabinoids. Opiates shut down your signaling between cells, and endocannabinoids and phytocannabinoids open them up. And, based on these things, we're going to have to get out of our state of denial.
Yeah.
Michael?
Are you guys there? Did we lose you?
Yeah.
We're here.
Yes, Amy.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's a problem. Regina, can you tell us a little bit about your book and how the people can get it real quick for the people listening? Give us the title.
Yeah, absolutely.
All that.
When do I get a question, Diamond?
I'll let Michael take this one, because I actually brought Michael into this. I put together a book called Talking to Your Doctor Patient About Medical Cannabis a couple of years ago when I was in Illinois in a new market, helping it open up. And Illinois is a little different than Colorado and many other states in that they don't allow medical cannabis evaluation centers. What this means is this policy says you have to have a long-term relationship with your doctor, meaning you have to go to your doctor and you have to talk to them. So patients would come to my nonprofit and talk to us, and we were trying to help bridge that communication gap. Well, Michael came in to help me rebrand that, and we're out on tour for Time for the Talk, and I'm going to let him give you the remainder of the details, including the website.
So, yeah, you might have heard her drop this unfamiliar term a little earlier, clinician level 1 training, the ECS clinician level 1. So let me drop the definition on that. That is an endocannabinoid caregiver having direct contact with and responsibility for administering cannabis therapy, clinicians and counselors who are trained in endocannabinoid therapy, or the endocannabinoid system. So that's a clinician, like a clinician, specifically cannabis.
Mm-hmm.
And, so she mentioned that it is for doctors, these CMEs, continuing medical education. Doctors actually will be getting this information over the next few years as places like American Academy of Family Physicians certify continuing medical education for the endocannabinoid system. So these are units that they have to take every year. We've got 4 hours of them, and it also applies to clinical psychologists, dermatologists, anybody that is in the medical field has to take these continuing education units or continuing medical education. So there's different names, CUs, CEUs, CMEs, but they all have to do them. And so basically the book, Time for the Talk, which she mentioned we rebranded from this book that she put out for Illinois patients. And it really just gives them the basics. If you're going to go in and talk to your doctor, which like Illinois is incredibly uncomfortable because a lot of these people, it's the family doctor, maybe the kid doesn't want mom or the grandma to know or the aunt to know that they're talking about this to their doctor. And again, the doctors are oftentimes just woefully ignorant and to no fault of their own. I mean, the medical schools just haven't included this information, even though it's 30 years old. Raphael Mechoulam uncovered this system in 1988, and in 90, all through the time since, we've discovered more about it. Like I said, NIDA's been supporting work over in Israel. But what the book, Time for the Talk, and you can go to timeforthetalk.today, which lays out some of the information about the trainings that we're doing live across America. We'll have those online fairly soon because, like you, Diamond, we're somewhat busy people. We're traveling a lot. And so the book does have this awesome, or if you go to the website, timeforthetalk.today, if you're a doctor who's like, okay, I really should learn about this, and maybe I can get my practice ahead of other practices in my area if I know about this before it gets legalized, whether it's nationwide or in my state, there's a chapter that they can just download. And same for a patient. If they wanted to go in and talk to their doctor, it's good to have some ammo. Like Dr. Nelson mentioned, a lot of these patients are incredibly educated about their condition, which leads them to become educated about options, especially when they run into that awful pharma fog. So yeah, like the curious patient section just runs down, like, check out where you can have your qualifying conditions, get prepared, determine if you have a state qualifying condition is step 1. Step 2, list your qualifying condition and symptoms, kind of list this out for yourself. Before you go talk to your doctor, bring along educational and moral support. Bring a buddy if you need to. This is your healthcare plan. Excuse me. Step 1 is actually order and review your own medical records. A lot of people are petrified to do this. They think it's like owned by somebody else and they don't have any access to it or right to it. And the doctors will provide that sort of gatekeeping service. So you really, sometimes, depending on where you are, you do have to get sort of insistent. Like if you're going to come up with a reason why you're not going to take vaccines, they're going to push those on you hard. And just kind of the same thing, or having your baby get a birth certificate when they're born at a hospital. I mean, I don't know if they get commissions on this stuff, but it is pushed at you so hard that you can't get your own medical records. But yeah, step 1, order and review your own medical records. Step 2, determine if you have a qualifying condition. Step 3, list those qualifying conditions and the symptoms you're having. Bring along educational and moral support to that talk, and then be prepared to take notes, because the doctor will likely have questions for you and also information that you're going to want to keep for the long term. So whether you run your phone recorder or take notes, however you do it, try to keep some documentation of that conversation.
Wonderful. I read through Time for the Talk quickly, but I think it's a great way to get started because there is so much to know. I mean, I feel like I know basically nothing. I know something, and I know a little bit more than a lot of people, but there is so much to know. So if you walk into your doctor's office without that education, you might run into a really tricky situation, because if you run into a doctor that doesn't really know anything and therefore shows some resistance as a result, then it's probably not going to go very well. So for both a patient and a doctor, it's a great way to get started to even, just have that conversation, or, see what's going on in your state, what is and isn't legal in your state. It's really nice that, the resources to look that up is provided there. Thank you so much for putting that together. It's great.
Absolutely. No fault to the doctors. A lot of them are impaired by institutional policies that don't let them recommend. And so it's just a very touchy thing for a lot of them, because they're scared about their licenses and stuff. So that's a great thing about the medical professional section that you can also download if you're anywhere in the medical field and want to learn more about this. There's key research findings from Dr. Nelson's previous book about the medical cannabis recommendation, which is like, a lot of it is that the patients want to share in the decision making. They want to feel heard, and they also want to share in the decision making. And then one of the things that's really important to doctors is the U.S. court support for healthcare options. They're not legally at risk for recommending medical cannabis to patients, and it's backed up by legal precedent. So
right. I think the main thing is it's what I heard consistently from doctors that have stepped out of practices and into cannabis therapy as kind of integrative physicians in that sense, is that, when they took the time and they listened to their patients, they really didn't have an explanation for why they heard, the same thing from so many different patients. And so they started looking. And again, it's this key factor of once you really start to understand the endocannabinoid system, we really can't be in denial about this. We just recently, people are like, oh, but this is a bit, how can we believe that? Well, we just recently come to understand we have a whole other organ in our body, throughout our body, underneath our skin there, the interstitium or something. Yes. This is brand new. We obviously do not know everything. And given what we've come to know,
and that's a science boom. We don't know everything.
We just don't know everything. And it just amazed me. Myself, I'm a PhD. My focus is on narrative research. I spent 25 years in human resources. And there's always multiple sides to a story. And you always have to listen. And I think there's a whole lot to be said about how patients get to cannabis therapy. They're failed by the conventional medical system. And, no one's ever told me they regretted coming to use this. What they regretted is they didn't know about it sooner.
Right.
And so, I think that's powerful and needs to be told.
If I'm a layman, an herbalist, a shaman, can I go to ECS Therapy Center and become a clinician for my patients?
Yeah, absolutely. We're having naturopaths, a nutritionist, nurses, medical assistants that are very interested in that, because this, again, it just gives you that educated step up and a layer of credibility, because there's not a lot of really credible cannabis education out there. And so by having these classes that we're teaching for physicians, we feel like this is a great level 1. We'll be offering level 2 in the fall, and level 3, we're setting out train the trainer sessions. Since you guys are so supportive of things going on in this industry, the ECS Therapy Center is running a project this year called Signs for the Times. And what we've done is bring together a group of certified deaf interpreters from around the country who have experience developing medical language and having it accepted into American Sign. Because a sign that's reminiscent of you smoking a joint is not how kids are using cannabis for seizure disorders. And to have to spell out endocannabinoid system between a patient and a doctor slows the communication tremendously.
And then explain it.
And then you need to explain it. And as a social scientist, what I know is that you change and you normalize things by changing language and developing language around those new things. And so if we help develop the 3rd largest language in the world and empower people who are hearing impaired to learn about the endocannabinoid system and ask questions about it through interpreters that they may have with medical services and educational services and other things like this, will make a powerful impact. And if we wait for government funding to do that, we'll wait another 40 or 50 years. So we're trying to gain support from a number of organizations around the country and raise the funds we need to bring into one of these train the trainer sessions so that they'll come through and be educated and learn how the language is used, same condition training. And we'll be offering that to a group of train the trainers as well as this group of certified deaf interpreters in August and again in October, because we need a lot of people out there training this education all over the country. There's nothing but room for people to come in and educate and to be able to utilize really solid, grounded curriculum. Just gives people credibility in their own communities.
Yeah, even all these young employees at all these the top dispensaries that have been working with hundreds of varieties for years, they don't even know. They're you ask them questions, they don't know. They're clueless. So it really is the people who have been decades of growing and making the medicine that really have the knowledge. And working at the farmers market for several years, I've spoken to dozens of people, dozens and dozens, and asked them if we had like some sort of a educational symposia on cannabis medicine, how to make it, and that type of thing, would they be interested? And everyone says yes. So if you go to the right place and have the right marketing, you would have a huge audience, especially in Pagosa Springs or the Four Corners area.
Well, we might have to add a tour stop down here because we'd love to be in this part of the state anyway. But, that is one of the things. My book, the e.s.t Therapy Companion Guide, has been out for almost 3 years now. And we've learned so much more since then. But it's one of the only manuals for people or guides for people that has targeted dosing instructions. And so Michael and I we're publishing partners, and we're right at the final pieces of editing with that. It's getting ready to go to print. We'll be doing a book release party July 11th at the Hans Museum in Berlin, Germany. And it is an extended version of that. And it's got dosing around CBD only, or a combination of THC and CBD, or with THC-rich oils, depending on what the person finds out their needs are. But it gives people comfortable places to start. It talks about nearly 100 different conditions. It talks about pediatric use. It talks about use with mammals, with all of our little mammalian friends, our dogs and our cats.
Because every mammal has one, too.
They do. And people are seeing miracles in their pets utilizing, cannabis oil as well. And you're right, growers and patients, I'm actually a leadership scholar. And when I got into this as a academic, I went to talk to people who were in business and who were, doing policy work and all sorts of different things. And I really came to understand it was primarily patients and growers in small communities all over the place that were the real leaders and real people behind, sustainable, substantial change in this. And I've written about that quite a lot.
Yeah, she mentioned language, Diamond, and language being so important. And so that's why these commission certifications are, the commission, I guess I want to circle back to bud tending and how this industry has presented itself at times very professional, like in this documentary Illegally Alive about a patient in Colorado that had to move there from Illinois for access to medicine for his Crohn's disease, just a teenage kid. But in this movie, they talk about all the benefits to Colorado economically and everything. And so, and the way that it's monitored, any bud shop that you go into has more cameras usually than a bank. So the way this industry has presented itself is at times very solid and adhering to the ridiculous amount of regulation that they've had to put up with. And yet in other ways, they've presented themselves. And I guess in Colorado, beer and whiskey are so ubiquitous that you almost see how the moneyed powers that be presenting this industry had to sort of align it with that business model. And unfortunately, people like Washington Liquor Control Board get involved and then run it the same way maybe Harry Anslinger did after the end of alcohol prohibition. But yeah, calling them bud tenders is like, go down to the bar and here's somebody who's going to sling you some bud.
Yeah.
That's what they do, though.
and
yes,
so,
it is.
So the commission training is almost like, snow sports training. There's going to be a level 1 instructor. There's going to be a level 2 instructor. There's going to be level 3 and side parts. But basically, if you're treating epileptic kids, or if you're dealing with traumatic brain injury, or if you're dealing specifically with cancer, or if you're dealing specifically with PTSD or skin issues, there'll be these other sort of areas, but basic levels of certification so that people, when they walk into a shop or walk onto a mountain resort, okay, I want to go with a guy that's got 3 levels of, certification to take me on my ski lesson. Similar.
Yeah, well, I want to be a black belt, but let's get to the reality and let's talk about what the cannabinoid system and cannabis medicine does, because I find it frightening that we've known so much about cannabinoids and now we're learning more and more about terpenes. And the mainstream still has no idea what these cannabinoids are capable of. When you see op-eds or written pieces about cannabis medicine, the majority of people think it's good for nausea for people that have been poisoned with chemotherapy. Whereas there are many doctors out there, if you treat independently cancers with cannabis oil, you get a net result that's just as good with chemotherapy and, let's say, smoking pot for nausea. They don't put the pieces together that these cannabis oils, the full plant extracts, are capable of bringing your body's immune system back into super condition. And what happens is so the cannabis medicines aren't curing anything, you're curing them with your body. What the endocannabinoid system does is it fixes all of your glandular systems and puts you on super mode, and you kill the cancer. You stop the inflammatory disease with your own immune system. The cannabis isn't doing it. It is super boosting your immune system and your own body's natural affinity to fight disease.
Right.
Dead on.
Live on. It does all of those things, and it seems like so much more. Yeah, and that was the thing, again, when I came to really start to understand the effects that it has and became so curious as to start reading so much clinical research. I never went to medical school. I don't understand why more doctors aren't just absolutely enamored with this.
They might be out of a job.
That's what I was going to say.
That's what everyone's worried about.
I appreciate.
Well, I think it goes back to Socrates and this, let thy medicine be thy food and thy food be thy medicine. It absolutely had to be hemp-based, what he was talking about. It had to be cannabis. Because we have to, this whole system, again, I really like, you mentioned earlier John McPartland's work, and really he's looked at the migration of man and animals across the globe. And, Bob Mellamy talks about the evolution of man being really connected to our endocannabinoid system. And one of the things that was consistently noted by 100% of the participants in my dissertation work was that after people come to cannabis therapy, they have a change of consciousness around things like their diet and a lot of people, and it's
lifestyle,
just basic lifestyle. And they find, they're calmer, they're less angry, they have less road rage. They somewhere in month 2 or 3 of a good therapy plan, they're suddenly like, maybe I should be eating a little healthier and these kind of things. The doctors pointed it out because they see it consistently, and patients pointed it out. And, that's that consciousness piece that we all know, and that's the piece that our government's afraid of. But I think,
that's the transformative learning that people who encounter this plant go through.
And that is the transformative learning piece that people that encounter this go through. And all I can say is that's expanding. We're seeing that happen. And I think that it's going to continue to have an enormous impact on society and a very positive impact, overall.
Yeah, even Scott, the engineer that's making this radio show possible, bought some gummies to try to treat his restless leg syndrome. I was trying to help him out. We started with some CBD. That didn't work, so then we bumped up to a 10-milligram THC gummy. I don't know if it worked for him, and I don't know if he's able to talk to us right now to tell us, but but I'm sure he's listening, and he does have an answer. So a lot of people are open-minded. I mean, this is the safest medicine available.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I start a lot of people like that for restless leg syndrome. The topicals are really good too, and they don't get you high, but they make a dent. And that makes someone more comfortable to go ahead and get the gummy and eat that and try that. It's really, Michael and I have been traveling the country doing the Planet Seeds for last year. I think we put in around 50,000 miles. We've already got about 12,000 miles this year, and we are getting ready to hit the air, too, and take off. So we've got a lot of travel to do this year, but we'll be in the craziest little tiny town restaurant cafe and just sit down tired from the road, to get a cold drink and have a bite to eat. And we'll overhear two little old ladies talking about news, and they talk about medical marijuana. Or we hear two older men at the bar stools, and they're like, hey, are you going back to Colorado and getting some more of that medical marijuana your grandson told you about? Yeah, it's really working for me. And we hear these things, and it's, again, it's not the people. Well, and it's not that we're just tired. And they talk loud. But, but the piece of this is the people want it. It is that we have pharmaceutical industry, lobbyists. It is that we have prison complex lobbyists. The prison complex is on the stock market. They have to fill those cells. Small-time marijuana possession breaches probation for somebody who's been doing really good for a number of years and puts them right back in. And this is a cycle that takes advantage of our poor and uneducated and many other things that are just wrong. And, I think as we see hemp coming into small communities, we start to see change. We see change with law enforcement. I give a really good example of a little town called Delavan, Illinois, where a very large grow facility went in and a tornado hit there right about the same time the news hit that this grow facility was going in. And they were actually able to financially help the town and then put a lot of people in the town to work. And when the highway patrols started coming in early on and writing down tag numbers for employees who'd already been through background checks and had a state badge, it became this thing of the town took care of it. The mayor and the city police went and talked to them and said, you don't get to treat people like that. They're a legal business, and they're helping us, and we're working. They're working legally. You treat them like you treat anybody else. And that made a difference in their small town. And it brought in other business, as you all know. Those people need to eat lunch and, pick up groceries on their way home. And they might decide to move closer. And all these things happen over time. And we see it again and again and again all over the country.
That's why cannabis companies should be supporting nonprofits. They should also be really doing things in their community. Like, where's the friggin' cannabis industry lobby? Seriously.
Yeah.
Billions. Pharma has billions to spend on lobbying.
They don't need it because of the amount of money that flows through those doors. Once they open up, it's a no-brainer. It's just growing and growing and growing the industry. So, but if they do get throw their, ring, whatever you call it, throw their hat in the ring, and start to do that stuff, things will change. But we have a similar story in Pagosa. Yeah. One of the largest medical compassionate care growers is up on a back road here. They grow for the Lupus Foundation, I think is up north in Denver or near you up in Boulder. And they've got, where, you know what it is?
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I know which dispensary you're talking about.
They grow their flower down here, and someone broke in last year, and the police were all over it. It was in the newspaper. So which is why the police are on the side of the people growing cannabis here, because it brings 17% tax commission. Millions of dollars have flowed into this town in the last few years. We are the richest little town ever.
The tax, the funding for our schools has been enormous. Plus, it feeds the tourism industry, and this town is big into tourism because it keeps things alive here economically. So it's huge, and it's very clear that the town recognizes the benefit.
You need.
Well, and I think the town levels, Aspen, Vail, and others, they recognize that too. But it's so funny to hear about how Colorado tourism is up when snow is obviously way down this year, but you don't hear the news stations give the cha-ching to the cannabis industry because the people are still coming and hanging out at the resort. So there's no snow. We'll just go to the dispensary. We'll just hang out in the hot tub. It'll be great. And, again, you don't have the crime factors. There's been a lot of studies done. Particularly, let's look at the difference just between alcohol and cannabis use. You don't have the violence involved. When you look at DWI and they say, well, it's up in Colorado. No, more people test that they have cannabis in their system, but actually, fatality driving and very serious accidents are down. And what we find from studies is that, the cannabis user is going to miss their exit. They're not driving dangerously. They just forget they should have got off back there. And I did it in Pagosa just yesterday. But
safely turn
around and go back the other way. And studies show this over and over and over again. So, we still have this 5 nanogram rule. I'm over 5 nanograms right now, and typically am. And when you use the oils and you have a really good cannabis therapy plan, you don't have a lot of euphoric side effects, but you have a lot of nanograms of THC running around in your system. But that doesn't make you impaired. In fact, it makes me functional.
20 nanograms at any given moment.
Right.
We heard you smoke copious amounts.
Well, I take a lot of medicine every night. I read the Phoenix Tears book, the Rick Simpson protocol. I make the oil. I need to test the oil. And just like you said, over a period of time, you can increase your dose to massive levels, and there is no euphoric effect at all.
No. In fact, you can set. I went to a cannabis cup and proved it because I did 60 dabs. I couldn't even tell you how many bowls and joints I smoked. I ate edibles all day. I could not get high to save my life, but I was taking 1,500 milligrams of CBD a day as well. So, I just couldn't, and I really wanted to just get a little step back and couldn't find it. Now that night I was starving to death when I got to real food that wasn't infused. I ate it all. But, but the deal is, for 3 days after that, I almost forgot to medicate because I felt so good because I still had so much, active cannabinoids in my system, and I wasn't high.
And that was just symptom alleviation.
And again, I manage fibromyalgia.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, Solaris Blue Raven, Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
That's right here at RevolutionRadioFreedomSlips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
There are a lot of them out there now, and they say they have all these different results, but nobody's really studying
for my new show.
And so I'm, going to be looking at line of
live from Kensington. Thursdays, I'm dealing with hot topics, heated debate, what's new around the world, and ringing to discuss listeners' problems and often consider not solutions. So join me, Chris Hart, for the Cannabis Show.
And
stop
we
what
hope
you're
to have
doing,
many
grab a
other
cup
cannabis
of tea,
users come in and provide us
from Kensington.
There's data.
Relax.
This is an opportunity for people to be able to share their voices.
Online.
This is something that I think
very
cannabis consumers overall
so
really
that's
want.
Thursdays, 2 p.m. in the afternoon, Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com.
It's just how people, their experience, and how they're doing, and describe it. And we're giving them the opportunity in this particular area, but I do hope that I'll be launching other studies in the course of the next
inviting you to
couple
join
years.
me on a cosmic journey.
Well, sounds amazing.
Exploring a metaphysical montage of spiritual material.
Time for the talk. Talking to your doctor or patient about medical cannabis by Dr. Regina Nelson. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it at timeforthetalk.today. Is that correct?
Nightlight provides you with
That's
equal
correct. You can
measure of
also
light,
find it
love, and
at
laughter, insight, wisdom, and inspiration.
myecstherapy.org.
Monday nights,
And
10
it's
to 12 p.m. Eastern, right
signsforthetimes.org.
here on Studio B,
And we're going to have all these links
Revolution
at the
Radio
bottom of this
at
video when it goes up on
freedomslips.com.
YouTube, so that you will all be able to go out and get the book for yourselves. Is there
the opinions
a
expressed
digital
on
version?
this radio station, its programs,
There
and its
absolutely
website by
is.
the
There's a
hosts,
Kindle
guests, and
version, and
call-in
again,
listeners
if you go
or
to
chatters are
Times
solely the opinions
for
of the
the
original
talk
source who
today,
express them. They
you
do
can
not
download
necessarily
for free.
represent the
Take a
opinions of
chapter
Revolution
or
Radio
two
and
chapters
freedomslips.com, its
and
staff, or
begin with
affiliates.
that.
You're listening to Revolution
that's
Radio,
fine.
freedomslips.com.
Yeah, do you think maybe you could
100% listeners
supply our
radio,
listeners
and
with
now
a
we return
discount
you
code?
to your host.
Let's do that, and I'll have it up.
We'll send it to you so you can put it on your website, and then people maybe can take that click through or something. We'll work out a deal with you.
It's going to be...
Go ahead.
It's going to be ORP 2018. That's going to be the code.
Okay.
We just don't know. It won't. We lie for a little bit.
We have about 3 days before that goes up onto the YouTube channel because we have a deal with the radio show. Yeah, so
we can do that.
3 days. Now, guys, can you? I'd like to talk in the second hour about making cannabis medicine and all the different ways that cannabis can be used to heal all different types of ailments. I'm sure you guys have a lot of background information on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Love to talk about that.
What do you
Where
think
do you want to start?
Well, I think we should start with discussing Phoenix Tears, the Rick Simpson protocol, which kind of got the information out there to the mainstream, which is simply how to make a full plant tincture.
Absolutely, and I do that. I only use food grade, grain alcohol. I believe that if you're not going to put it in your body anyway, you shouldn't be using it as a solvent. Unless you can guarantee you can purge 100%, which most can't. But I do that. In fact, I just made oil for us 2 weeks ago, and it'd been a few months since I'd done that, and it felt really good. But that's the thing, it's just really amazing to me how you can take this plant and, freeze it and freeze your alcohol and shake it up for a few minutes and then purge that alcohol out of that tincture, and you're left with a beautiful oil that just has such amazing healing potential. And there will be a step-by-step on how to do that within the Survivor's Guide to Medical Cannabis, the book we're putting out this summer. But I know there are a lot of good videos. I'm sure you have some on your YouTube channel as well.
And actually, you keep mentioning Rick Simpson, and Dr. Nelson mentioned that our association with Integral Education Press came out of another mountain town or another small rec town, Manitou Springs. A couple years ago, we had the first Cannabis Film Festival there, and we combined it with a conference on cannabis fitness. And Dr. Nelson was just finishing her PhD, and so she wasn't technically a doctor at that point, but just a couple days later she was. And so she spoke on the endocannabinoid system early in the day, and then spoke about cannabis in children, very controversial subject later that evening. But that day, we also watched the world premiere of a Colorado filmmaker, Michael Miguel Wise, and he's actually in Croatia with Rick Simpson right now, doing videos with Rick. And so his channel, I think, is Smokescreen Productions. So like you're smoking, it's a smokescreen. Smokescreen Productions on YouTube. And he's actually working on another documentary with Rick right now.
Excellent.
So can I tell you about my last batch?
Yeah.
Because Dr. Nelson has a very fine way of doing it. And after a lot of years of making this, I decided that the easiest way for me to make a big batch, and you really do want to make a big batch, especially if you're like trying to treat cancer or something, you really want at least 60 grams of good oil. Yeah. And a lot of times that requires a pound of material. So if I'm dealing with a pound of material, I'll grind it up however I grind it up, get it as fairly as small as possible. And then I would put it I would use 2 5-gallon buckets, food grade, and use the alcohol that Dr. Nelson mentioned. You use like Everclear is the best thing. You can get it in the half-gallon at the liquor store. Sometimes
in Colorado, you can now get 420 extractor liquid.
Yeah,
they it's cheaper. And if you go to Mexico, you can get that same stuff for $4.
5 gallons?
No, for just the liter.
Okay.
But it was at $8 for the 2 liter. Amazing to me the taxing here in the United States on alcohol.
The 420 stripper is 25% cheaper. It's local grain, and it's made right here in Four Corners area.
Oh, nice!
I recommend using it.
Oh, that's awesome.
The jig most definitely is up on Everclear. So whatever, if you use that 420 extractor liquid, so you probably want a couple gallons of that. So at least a gallon, probably 2. And I just put all that stuff in a pillowcase, all the ground up material, put it in a clean pillowcase, pour the alcohol over the top of it. What's that?
That's very smart. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so just what falls through the pillowcase is all the trichomes, terpenes, terpenoids, fats, all that good stuff from the plant. And it comes out as this green liquid called the green dragon. Is that what you call it? Yeah, so green dragon. And basically that's all your medicine suspended in alcohol. And then you put it in a rice cooker and let that cook off. And, of course, you need a well-ventilated situation. Usually outside is best. But, yeah, you just get one of those.
You get a boom.
Right. You get an unintended boom. Yeah, and like as it gets kind of towards the end, and there's lots of stuff online, and I check out Smoke Screen Productions because Mike just recently put up Phoenix Tears process video that uses just like quart jars and stuff, so it makes it real easy for somebody at home. What I'm talking about is a big batch, and basically you just kind of, as it gets gooier and more like molasses in the bottom of your rice cooker, you add some water, and that bathes off all the extra alcohol, and you end up with just this gooey black liquid that has amazing propries.
Yeah, now you're down to the black liquid. You're not at Rick Simpson oil. You need to decarboxylate the product. And do you decarboxylate your oil?
Usually just to the level that the rice cooker cooks it.
Okay.
And I try to keep that on a very low boil.
So that level is at 190. If you want to make a more potent product, you can then put it into a dry oven at 245. You do not exceed 245 ever, because you're going to start to destroy cannabinoids. But if you bring it up a little higher than the cooker, and you can add a little water in this phase, you can keep it in the oven for an hour or more, stirring it until all the bubbles come out, and you'll actually have a completely decarboxylated oil where all of the acid version of the cannabinoids have been turned into bioavailable versions.
And you make an excellent point, Diamond, about the bubbles. For the people that are new to this, they tend to rush the process, and so getting rid of all those bubbles, they get very, very minuscule. They're like the head of a pin, but you've got to let all of those expire before you're done.
Yeah, then you have a clean product. You're guaranteed a perfect clean oil. The only other tip I would say is that when you're doing the pillowcase bucket extraction, you can lower the temperature of your grain alcohol or your stripper. If you lower it to around freezing, it's called the chillaxed method, and you actually strip more of the honey oil and less of the green, which is chlorophyll. So you actually get more.
And freezing your material first. You're absolutely right.
And I do that. I've been taking that process and keeping some of it in THCA state, because then you can take higher doses with less euphoria, and your body will still convert the THCA into THC. And so for a lot of people, that's really helpful. And, so that's one of the ways that I've come to really like to do it. And so I keep the alcohol frozen and the cannabis frozen separately, and then I put them together very quickly. And I bought a vibratory tumbler so I can just put them in a container, put them in there, and just shake the shit out of them for about 4 or 5 minutes, and then get a really good strain. I do several filters from that, and I'm getting just I've been refining the process. I just started making oil in the last year, for our own use. Yeah. And again, we make it at a time and then have it for several months. And, the thing is it's quite empowering to be able to make your own medicine and feel the impact of it so positively in your day-to-day life.
Yeah, Leah, you could speak to this.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Diamond started making RSO, and I have been battling insomnia for about 20 years. And I've gone through I've tried all kinds of pharmaceuticals and blah, blah, blah. And, none of that really solves the problem. But RSO, Brick Simpson oil, makes an enormous difference for me. And it just, I can't really say much about it except that it blows me away just because of the number of different things that I've tried. And that makes such a big difference in my life. And for me personally, I'm very sensitive to lack of sleep. I mean, it screws up the rest of my body. I can't control my body temperature. I get really tense and anxious when I don't sleep and all of these things. So it's just such a dramatic improvement on the quality of my life.
Well, this is true for most people. When we sleep, it's when we go through apoptosis. Cells die every night, millions, and they get cleaned out. And this is something that cannabis is shown to really work at on the cellular level. And again, keep us balanced. And, I've helped people with insomnia, sometimes even just the topical salves on their neck and shoulders, and they're like, oh my God, thank you. It's life-changing.
And those things are life-changing.
The symptoms you described, Leah, are epidemic in America.
Epidemic with stress and anxiety and the work culture we have and all of these things. And when you stay tired like that, you don't question a whole lot of things because you don't have a lot of mental capacity, but just to get through. And I got insomnia when I started getting about 1.5 years before the bowel resection, and I had always been a really good 8-9 hour a night sleeper. Even when I had the worst job scenarios, I might lose a night here or there, but I didn't lose many. And when it was consistent, you really suffer. And when getting it back was just, again, game-changing, health-changing, life-changing. And I hear this over and over for people because they come because they have cancer, but they don't say they have insomnia. But the first week they're on oil, it's insomnia, and for women, it's interstitial cystitis pain, which is bladder pain and cramping that a lot of women live with, and the options are really horrible pharmaceutically. And it's like, day 3 of even a low dose of oil, and they're like, it's done. Like, I'm not having pain, and oh my God, that changes my day-to-day life. And so I tell people all the time, don't look for a cure in cannabis, but expect a change to your quality of life, because that's what really counts. And I don't really think there's a cure to anything. I think we've all gotten so toxically sick from our environment that we may not be able to be cured from that, but we certainly can have a much better quality of life than we've been led to believe by, conventional methods. I certainly do.
I think it goes back to the idea that Diamond mentioned that, essentially cannabis helps your body work better overall. Because all of these things that we're talking about, whether it's sleep or, like another example with sleep would be that your immune system works its hardest in your sleep. That's why when you're sick, you sleep a lot. But if you don't sleep, you're going to get sick a lot. It's all of those things that feed back into homeostasis. I noticed that you guys mentioned, Regina, you mentioned in one of your books, cannabis as a neuroprotectant and a neurogenerative. And the neuroplasticity element of that. Again, to me, that's another example of some way that your body functions, that you can improve its function in that department, and you can grow new neurons and, all of that.
I just read.
Leah, are you ready for? I was going to see if Leah's ready for a brain bomb.
Oh, I totally am.
All right, so you mentioned brain stuff, so there's this condition called schizencephaly, and it's brain malformation. Pardon?
Say that again?
Schizencephaly. What's encephaly mean, doctor?
Well, encephaly has to do with your brain.
Brain irritation.
Yeah, usually inflammation. But in this case, schizencephaly is a brain malformation condition, and many people are born without their whole brain. Some of them find out because they have seizures. Some don't know. I met a man who was in his early 40s who started having seizures in his 30s, and when they finally did an MRI to find out why, he'd always thought he had a mild case of cerebral palsy, and he came to find out he was missing about 30+% of his brain. He was born with schizencephaly. Well, yeah, Michael's pushing me to tell you a story about a little girl who came to Colorado Springs in 2013 from Texas. Her name is Nova Lee, and people can follow her on Facebook at Supernova. And her mother's a prolific writer and really tells her story quite beautifully. But 10 months into cannabis therapy, and this little girl who'd only been born with 24% of her brain, who at the time she left Texas, the best neurologist in Texas wanted to remove half of this small amount of brain and sever the two sections to see if they could stop her from having hundreds of seizures a day and sometimes hundreds of seizures an hour. And her parents instead, scared to death that she would die, which often happens with that surgery, they brought her to Colorado. And with the first doses of cannabis oil, they got relief from seizures. She's now at times going 6 or 7 months between seizures and having very, major differences. But what was interesting is 10 months into therapy, she started having seizures and was taken to the hospital because the pharmaceuticals she was taking and had been taking because they'd never seen a pituitary gland in any MRI. And she'd never had any pituitary function. All her blood work showed she didn't have growth hormone. She didn't have, all of these things that her pituitary was required to balance. So she was on all these different pharmaceuticals doing that. And pretty soon into cannabis therapy, while she had seizure control, she was now getting seizures because the pharmaceuticals were taking her too far the other way. And they finally placed her in the hospital and did an MRI. And they said, well, it's probably because of this malformed pituitary gland. And Mom's like, what pituitary gland? They're like, right here. And so I sat down with Raphael Mechoulam and, many, Ethan Russo, many of the most famous scientists in this to tickle their brains. I'm like, can you explain to me how this happened? And they're like, oh, wow. We're so far from being able to tell you on a cellular level how that happened. But wow, you push us to want to know more.
Was the consensus that she basically grew a pituitary gland at that point?
Well, I'm going to say regenerated. And I'm going to say this. I can show you her. You can go to her mom's Facebook page. You can look for information. As a layperson, you can look at MRIs of her brain taken before cannabis therapy and after. And you can see she has more brain mass. You can see there's more signaling going on. These same kids, many kids with this now are having brain mapping and other things done. There's a boy named Noah in Florida, and just night and day, we've been told all our lives this is going to kill your brain cells. No, it's not. And I'm going to tell you, the most vulnerable kids in the world are showing us that this is hugely safe and great for our brains. And, we're seeing it happen with seniors and Alzheimer's too. But, but the brain as a senior is not as malleable as it is when you're a child. And we're seeing miracles in children. And that will become news in the next few years and require people to take a much, deeper look at this.
Amazing.
I still read an article today in the paper that kids that smoke pot in legal states are killing their brains, reducing their brain function and their memory by 8%, and they're all addicted.
They're all addicted. Yeah. Well, here's the deal. I'll put it this way. So here's the real news. We all have an endocannabinoid system, and we make this wonderful cannabinoid called anandamide. Ananda is Sanskrit for bliss, and amide is chemical. So when they found it in 1991, they named it chemical bliss because they were looking to see what THC did to this newly found receptor system, and they came to find out this receptor system made THC. Anandamide, or at least the body's version. They work in the receptors the same. And none of us would be here without anandamide, which is an endogenous cannabinoid that we all make. And THC is a phytocannabinoid. But all of us would not be here without anandamide because it's required for the embryo to implant into a mother's uterus. And when a baby is born, a mother all of a sudden her anandamide levels go up because she expresses more into her breast milk. And what I've come to find observationally, and I have no clinical data, but as we've seen so many kids with seizure disorders, they often start to seize right after their mom started to wean them to go back to work, around month 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, they were getting a natural supplement before that with anandamide. And so, we have to look at these things, more, and we are doing some of that research, but there's very little funding. I mean, this has got to change as well. But none of us would be here without this receptor system. It's really important overall. And these phytocannabinoids are shown by science to be a really exceptionally, perfect fit for the receptor system, or stimulant for the receptor system, and work in ways that scientists can't quite explain yet because of the retrograde signaling, because of the transport signaling, because this does so much at a cellular level that to bring that forward to a regenerated pituitary gland is just not possible yet.
Yeah. You mentioned oxytocin early in this interview, and knowing that oxytocin is very responsible for bonding between children and mothers and feeling good and all of those things. What is the connection to cannabis with oxytocin?
Well, again, it's in the Current Cell magazine. You can go take a look. I'm not a scientist to explain it really in detail, but basically what they found is that the receptor level that the receptors that receive and work with oxytocin, the GABA system, BOS system, there are a lot of systems that work with this through oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin. I mean, again, these are all brain signaling systems that this balances. And so it selectively recruits endocannabinoids based on your need. If you're perfectly healthy this morning, your body needs one thing, it has certain needs. But if you're in a car accident this afternoon, you suddenly have very different needs, and your body has to respond to that. And so, this system does that. And they can't always explain why, why it does something one time and then it doesn't the next time. Well, at a cellular level, it's what your body needs now, and it didn't need an hour ago. But scientists are having a hard time pinning those things down because it's a very complex system.
Sure.
Now, what I find fascinating about cannabis medicine and the ease of making it, now that you have the Rick Simpson oil, which anyone can Google and watch on YouTube, 100 methods, we've suggested the Chillax method, which is Chillax, which you can also Google, which is keeping everything frozen at first and doing it at a low temperature, so you get less chlorophyll and less plant products and more medicine. Now, you just take a little of this oil and you can mix it into a proprietary oil or a delivery oil like emu oil, which is the best result. If you put the cannabis medicine in emu oil, you get the best transdermal medicine impart into the system. If you just make some of this oil and give it to someone that is scared of cannabis or cannabis medicine and they have a pain, these topical preparations are amazing. 3 years ago, someone who makes limbo lotion, which only has CBD in it, gave me some for my knee. I put it on, and it was like in 5 minutes, it felt like I got Novocaine injections.
How about the guy at the farmer's market with who had back pain, and like his wife came to get some lotion for him because he was too scared, and he tried it and he was totally blown away apparently?
Yeah, 5 minutes later he showed up in public and bought it all.
You know, he was afraid to come forward initially, and then he was just so impressed because it affected him so heavily.
It's so entrenched.
It's so entrenched. You know, when we were in 2013, it's when I was starting the nonprofits here in Colorado, and I was at the Colorado State Fair, and on a Sunday that Sanjay Gupta did the first weed special that highlighted Charlotte Figge out of Colorado Springs. The fair had the news had come around the fair and asked people, did they think a cannabis education booth was appropriate for the Colorado State Fair? And they had overall said yes, which was good. But the next day, we had lines of people showing up with kids. But I always stood there with cannabis salve in my hand because I could have it legally. I was over 21 and I was using it. But these old people that come around and give me the stink eye, I get them to put just a little bit on one knuckle, and you can count the time it took them to walk around the thing and come back and be like, what was that? Because that's the only place in my hand that doesn't hurt. How do I get that? What do I need to do? And they were ready to go, and they wanted to just slather in it. And you're right. CBD is powerful in and of itself, and we see a lot of good results. It's not perfect for everybody, but in Illinois, before the medical market opened, I suggested to a lot of people that they begin CBD, and a lot of people had really good results and didn't need to move on to the medical program. Others needed the THC. Everybody is different, but cannabis therapy is empowering. So, you know, and it's what's readily available to you. You know, I've known people that have gone out and picked feral hemp and made RSO out of it, you know, in desperation.
Yeah, you can.
And they have some cannabinoids. It's not great, but you know what? They felt better. They did better. They had some type of quality of life result.
Yeah, and I find it amazing why the cosmetics industry hasn't picked up on the topical application of this cannabinoids. They have rejuvenative effects on the skin. It is under-researched. It actually has shown to reduce the aging process. And if women knew this, they would literally pay any amount to get it in their face cream. And do you know anything about the
cosmetics? It's coming, honey. It's coming. I mean, and I also say that here's the things I always said when I was smoking pot illegally. I'd be like, well, if it make wrinkles go away in women, if it make hair grow in men, if it make people lose weight, and it can do all of these things through different cannabinoids and working with the receptors. It has all these possibilities, you know, that are top of the market type things. It just does. You know, and then you've got these great healing benefits to boot. I mean, if we were all consuming cannabis in our diets just normally, well, one, smoking pot wouldn't have such a euphoric effect, but we'd also be so much healthier. I think a real reason that we're so unhealthy as a nation, besides what we eat, is we took this crop out 80 years ago. And we, you know, we drive through Kansas and stuff like that now, and you go into the State House in Kansas in Topeka. If you look up at the dome, it's circled with cannabis leaves. Why? Hemp was the number one crop of cannabis in the 1930s and before. You know, as it became a state, it was huge there. People were healthier. It was in their regular diet. And I think that's the piece, you know, that growers really get that so many others don't. And I look forward to the day that we have real legalization and people can be, juicing this and eating this a lot like spinach and all, these kind of things, so that we're all a lot healthier.
Yeah, because Diamond, how good it is to eat hemp seed. So as this becomes more of a commodity, hopefully we're going to see leaves for juicing in the supermarket. We're going to see hemp seed sprouts as an alternative to alfalfa and such things like that. So, or bean sprouts. So, juicing is amazing with this plant. The THCA is great for nausea. It is. When I really started getting into making RSOs for a partner that I had that had waited for a long time to go to the doctor and had a prognosis, diagnosis of 4th stage metastatic breast cancer. And it was in her sternum. It was a bunch of places, but like Gershon therapy, which is basically just eating all vegetables, nothing that's going to create inflammation in the body, such as red meat, sugar, anything that's going to cause that inflammation. So she also used baking soda and lemon to alkalize the body. If that body is completely alkalized, then there's no way for the cancer cells to grow, or for really anything in the body to grow in a bad way. So basically through these methods, kind of becoming vegetarian and then juicing the leaves, as well as smoking for acute issues, because she did decide to do the chemical treatment as well. What is that? Chemotherapy. So she was on the drip, but she was also doing all this other stuff. And in 90 days, she had no chemical markers or no cancer markers in her blood. So it was pretty amazing. The juicing, if everybody were juicing this instead of wheatgrass, wheatgrass has its value, but if we were juicing cannabis leaves, everybody would be a lot healthier. And one of the points I want to make too is what a lot of people feel, and she was mentioning with the topical on the hands, what they're going to feel when they introduce this plant, and this people's plant into their body, is structural lubrication. They're going to feel a lot less aches and pains of just the normal aging process.
Absolutely. Now, we make a lot of medicine here, and if you do it with the chillaxed method and you run it through a 420 extractor or grain alcohol, you're leaving some medicine in the plant product, and this is a very valuable plant. So we air dry it for several weeks and let the chemicals, the alcohol evaporate off, and then it gets fed to our farm animals directly.
Yeah.
Our pigs love cannabis.
I was going to mention earlier, too, that, even wild animals seem to clearly know that cannabis is good for them. I can't tell you how many times we've seen deer, go after the cannabis before anything else that we've planted. They clearly are using this medicinally as well.
It's protein. It's a really great protein. I mean, you're looking at a full and complex protein, and it's so funny. I think a few years ago they were talking about medicalizing in Utah, and one of their senators was talking about, well, the rabbits and all the deer will get high. It was like, no, they already eat the feral stuff, you fool. They're the ones that would show you that this is like the plant to go to. And you do see that. People that have hemp grows and other things, I mean, their biggest foe out here is the deer and the antelope, and they have an endocannabinoid system too. Yeah, and it's just natural for them to want to go and eat that. It's so healthy.
Yeah. Just like a salad.
Right.
Yeah, and the chillax method works so well because it does keep the plant matter in your mix, but doesn't keep it in your oil. And that's because the trichomes and everything break off the plant a lot easier when they're frozen. It's more crispy, and so the medicine breaks off from the plant and lands in the alcohol. And so, yeah, the chillax is definitely the way to go and good promotion.
Mm. Excellent. You've heard of it referred to that actual terminology before.
Well, I've heard you refer to it, but it's definitely something over the years of making this, and also with Dr. Nelson's machine. It's basically like a water purifier machine, and it recovers the alcohol. So that's a really slick method, and I think they got them on Alibaba for under $200 if you want to go that way.
Oh, I just bought one for $99 off of there, and it just works great. And that's the thing I do. It's the alcohol is the expensive part for me, because I'm fortunate enough to know some growers who know the work I do, know how many people I have cared for in the past, and so they'll donate medicine so that I have medicine. And it keeps Michael and I on the road, and and some patients as well. But the thing is these water distiller or alcohol distillers, you can get them online on eBay, on Amazon. But you can reclaim I reclaim between, if it's a cold day, I get 95% of the alcohol back I put in the machine. And if it's a warm day, I get about 70% back, doing it outside. And so, that makes a little bit of a difference, but, that really helps to keep my costs down.
Yeah, because I get none of my percent back. It's rice cookered out.
Bye-bye.
Oh, then we need to turn you on to one of these, because they're awesome.
Yeah, I priced them. Are they the cool copper ones on eBay for about $300?
Oh, you could go there. I'm actually using one that's not that fancy. It's kind of a white, just a tabletop edition that has a temperature control. I'll text you over a picture of it so you can put it on your website. And you can also
make essential oils, like if we put mint in there, you could
fill out. You can make other essential oils. So that's really all you're doing with cannabis. We call it RSO because he made it, I guess he brought it back into the forefront. But it's really just an essential oil. It's cannabis's essential oil, and
that's lavender oil.
You can make. I got to, Colorado Springs outlawed for a while. Their city council banned alcohol extractions in the city, and I really pushed back because I'm like, you guys are near Manitou, these other areas. How many people make essential oils in your kitchen? You can do that very safely, and you're just saying it. Oh, so they made it specific only to the one plant. You just can't do it for cannabis, and it's that's so wrong and unfair because it's just a flower.
Yeah. How dare you concentrate that plant?
How dare you? Yeah, because, they want you to leave it, that's getting funded by industry dollars because, taking care of each other as patients, that hurts the industry. They don't understand that people can't always afford the industry and would just die without each other.
Well, actually, they do understand it. That's kind of the plan.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
So those people that are trying to source cannabis, it's becoming pretty available, and there's ways to get it that cheaper than at a dispensary. You just have to know a grower. You are legally allowed to grow pot for others in the state of Colorado, and they can pay you for your labor, just not for the weed. So you exchange your labor for the weed that you then supply them, and they can pay you for your labor to grow it.
Right.
It's a caregiver's green card, so you need to get your green card. Can you explain to the people out there listening now what a green card is, and is it important to have it versus recreational? Do you get better products?
Oh, you mean with the medical card? Well, they've changed them, now, yeah. And so they've been red, they've been purple, now they're printed out online and all those things, but for me, I've been buying on the recreational market because I let mine expire. I'm going to be renewing it this week because of the tax dollars. Because I usually can get better deals at a lower price. A lot of the dispensaries now, they'll make, just better deals on the medical side. There for a while, it was kind of sketchy. When we first got recreational was required to be tested, but medical wasn't yet. So a lot of product that was bad got moved, and there was just all sorts of craziness going on, and that seems to have settled out a whole lot. So I'm looking forward to kind of getting back into the medical market.
At least that's true here in Colorado, and things are changing so rapidly all over the place. I was a medical caregiver in Oregon back in the late, 2000 somethings, and basically you are the person that gets to grow the plant, because a lot of these people that need the plant medicine are definitely not prepared or capable of growing these plants, because it's work. Every day it's work, and a lot of people can't even lift a 20-pound bag of soil to do this stuff. So caregivers play an incredible role for patients, and basically I think in Colorado just regular citizens are able to still grow 4 or 6 plants, something like that.
Yeah, up to 9, I think it is.
Okay. Yeah, and so you really, if you want to mind your P's and Q's, you got to check into the regulations in your specific area, and that may differ from municipality to municipality within a state program.
Now, here's the insane thing. You can go and get your medical card here and then ask to be a caregiver. If you're a farmer, they'll definitely give it to you, because they know that you probably can grow cannabis for these people. And then you can get you can be allowed to grow up to 99 plants. And it's quite easy to do that for cannabis. But if you want to grow 99 hemp plants, that's not going to get anybody high. You have to buy a federal license and get aerial photographs and then show the GPS coordinates of every.
It's going to cost you thousands of dollars.
Every plant, and then they come and mark cars and chop down and test it to make sure it's at 0.003. It's insane. So it's impossible to get the hemp market up and running in North America, because it is over-regulated to the nth degree. But you can grow 100 pot plants and a pound each of 27% indica, and that's easy to do. It's so backwards.
And we're talking about hemp here, something that has huge industrial application, So you would think it wouldn't be like that, but no.
But it does have huge industrial applications, so yes.
And that's the sad situation we're in, or is it an opportunity? Because this is truly the plant, whether you look at it for medical or whether you look at it for hemp, America imports billions of dollars, or maybe it's close to $1 billion, but I think it's already over $1 billion of hemp products from other countries that we could be growing in those very fields that you talked about, Diamond, that the corn and the wheat are just withering under the conditions. This could actually be the plant, because all of the world is looking at America and Colorado and Washington and what's spreading out everywhere else, and just are amazed at what's taking place because of this grassroots effort by the people to repatriate this plant that has been, you mentioned pharma earlier, and before 33, there was only 37 different pharma products on the market, and 2/3 or 3/4 of them had cannabis in them. So this demonization is very recent, and we've had this medicine for a long time. Hello.
Scott here. It looks like we lost our connection to Diamond. Let me reestablish that. I'll be right back.
Okay, very good. Do you want us to keep talking, Scott?
Yes, please.
Okay, yeah. So, wherever we were as far as the demonization of this plant over time. Okay, yeah. So the endocannabinoid system, we should probably give them kind of an overview. Oh, let me work out this thing. And I wanted to work it out with Diamond, but so what I've been working on is this explanation or an analogy of the endocannabinoid system and some of the systems and chemicals that Leah was asking about earlier with Dr. Nelson. kind of the endocannabinoid system. If you liken it to the switchboard, and basically all the different departments have to communicate through the switchboard.
2 6 4 1 0 7 3. Can't take your call now.
Oh, bummer. Come on, Diamond, take our call. So basically, if the endocannabinoid system is the switchboard and all the different departments talk through the switchboard, we're still learning how, like Alexander Bell, how the phone works. And if we understand the switchboard mechanism, then we're probably going to be able to do a lot more for the homeostasis within our bodies. Doctor,
no,
do you speak?
Oh, guys, are you still there?
Yes,
are you there?
We're here.
We got
we
you
just
back.
found a landline, so the whole power is out. Is the power out in Pagosa?
Nope, we're good.
All right, well, we're back. So we have this backup battery-powered phone that's allowing us to get on the landline, but it is dark.
Now that's a boom.
That's a boom. How long are we gone? We're running around in the dark here.
Only a couple minutes, it seemed like.
Wow, so you filled the time. That's good. Well, we got 15 minutes to wing it here. Leah's behind me, so she's going to probably just take a break and light a candle. So in the last 15 minutes, what do you want to talk about? Let's plug your book and any other plugs that you guys want to talk about, because we're going to have this up on YouTube, and like 15,000 people are going to get to hear this, at least, just on the YouTube. So plug away.
Awesome.
Time for the talk. .today, not .com, not .org, not anything else, because it's urgent. Time for the talk. Today.
Amen to that. So what are your guys' plans? Where's the tour going, and what do you foresee? When do you foresee yourselves coming back to Pagosa? Give us a couple months, and we'll organize a huge event where we'll talk about cannabis medicine, and we'll have clinics, and we'll do it here at the ranch.
That'd be great. That's about right on schedule. Actually, we take off next week, and we're headed to Oklahoma, and we'll be participating in a fundraiser for Oklahomans for Health, and we'll be holding some events there, and then participating in the Mid-America Conference. They're coming up on State Question 788, and Oklahoma's my home state, so I'm pushing that very hard there. And then we may be going to Dallas following that, and then we'll be back in Colorado. We're off for a month in Europe this summer, but we have some dates available in August, and then we will be pretty much West Coast, end of August into early September. In September is when I'll be launching the Sexual Health and Cannabis Study, so keep an ear out for that. And Michael and I will be on the road through the end of the year, kind of all over the country, and the website will have the dates as they begin popping up. And then we're hoping to spend the very end of the year in New Zealand.
Where at?
In New Zealand.
Oh, that should be interesting.
Yeah, a couple dates in Hawaii on the way there, and North and South Island. And hopefully end it in a namesake city on the South Island, not far from Wellington, Nelson, New Zealand.
There you go.
Excellent. Let's get back to female health and cannabis medicine. Now, there's an extensive section in the Phoenix Tears protocol where they discuss making suppositories. And now this may be disgusting, but you can stick them in your butt and you can stick them in other nether regions. And they've had extremely excellent results with this type of dosing, I guess, or how would you say it?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely dosing. And, as Americans, we kind of snoot ourselves a little bit to suppositories, but they have a better bioavailability than taking a capsule. So Europeans and Asians are fairly used to them.
And Tommy Chong.
And Tommy Chong, because he had colon cancer. And so we see a lot of people with, colon cancer, prostate cancer, obviously uterine cancers and those type things, but even things like just monthly cramping. Women with very low dose, cannabis oil suppositories just can get a lot of relief on that. But for people who have endometriosis or endomyosis, other type of issues, they can be hugely soothing, if not provide a great deal of remission. You're talking about, again, anti-inflammatory, antifungal, antibacterial, so you've got a whole lot of good things in there. Again, women talk to me a lot about it reducing interstitial cystitis pain, which is very common with women who've had children, particularly senior women.
And this would be vaginal suppository.
Yeah, and so vaginal suppositories, it's kind of funny you mentioned this, but I was taking, I take capsules every night, and a few years ago, I was finally talked into going for a colonoscopy because after I had this bowel resection, it places my risk much higher for cancers. And I thought, well, you know what? I'll go ahead and do this one, get this one out of the way, and did. And I had a couple of very small precancerous polyps that were easily removed, but it made me start cognitively going, you know what? I need to be using rectal suppositories at least once a week as a preventative, right? So I don't have this kind of problem in the future. I'm also a menopausal woman. So I kind of have a regular, weekly routine. Once a week I use one rectally, once a week I use one vaginally, trying to keep things in good working order. And, a lot of women have now taken up that practice. It's something I talk to people about. It's kind of like layering your therapies and not always using just one way. Don't just take a capsule every day where you have to ingest it. You get that first pass through your liver. Sometimes use it sublingually. Sometimes, use a suppository. If you're having an acute issue, smoking and vaping are absolutely appropriate and can provide you a great deal of relief. And though it sounds counterintuitive to a lot of people, cannabis is a bronchial dilator. People cough after taking a big bong hit because they've overextended their lungs, not because they constricted them like cigarette smoking. So for people with COPD and cystic fibrosis, vape pens are just an excellent resource and a rescue aid. They're a rescue aid for people with seizure disorders and other things like that. I mean, cannabis is just, again, so multifunctional and does all the hard work for you.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, the one side effect I had noticed when I made my first batch of Rick Simpson oil, I was so excited that I had this full plant tincture, maybe 6 grams, and I dabbed a little on a toothpick, maybe the size of a rice grain, the way it explains, and I ate it. About 2 hours later, I slept like a baby for 20 hours on the first dose I ever took years ago. But right before I went to bed, I was lying there, and I remember the first side effect I noticed was I could breathe. I have COPD, a little asthma. I could breathe like never before, and I was like, it's the oil.
What a side effect.
And that's the thing. I see people now, again, they don't smoke and they don't vape. They just, began using either a tincture or a capsule or some type of product like that, or edibles. And they're like, wow, my chest is so much lighter. I'm breathing so much easier. Again, cannabis can be helpful in so many ways. And your body kind of makes that priority list. You may come because of one particular issue or another, but that doesn't mean your body's going to treat that first, or you'll get the most relief there first. And I particularly, say that to people with cancer, whose body has something critical going on, because they'll find relief in other ways. Sleep, like, you mentioned, that's huge for people who are sick. If you get a good night's sleep, just sets you in a better way, mentally, physically, and then again, you get to using it regularly and you start getting more active because you don't have the aches and pains, and then you take your diet a little bit more seriously, and pretty soon you're kind of in better shape. You lost weight. You feel better, your pain's under control, you're sleeping pretty well, you don't have a lot to complain about.
Definitely. A couple more notes for the home cooks is you mentioned sort of a sexy oil, emu oil. I don't know how easy that is for everybody to get, but everybody can go down and get coconut oil, which is also fairly bioavailable and absorbent. way to if you're stretching out your Rick Simpson oil. Great way to do it is with the topicals, and you can add other great things like arnica in there if you make it into a muscle sort of relaxing salve or something like that. I also mentioned taking it sublingually. So as we talk about mirroring the therapy and different delivery methods, sublingual tinctures are very easy to make. You can just put flowers in a mason jar full of alcohol and make a sublingual tincture out of that. Just 2 weeks, you can leave it in there, and that's going to pull everything out of there. Just leave the jar in the cupboard.
Yeah, I'll run like 3 or 4 ounces through a single jar to make my tincture. And you were breaking up a little there. So for those listening out there, I suggested emu oil is the most bioavailable when adding your THC medicine. Based on clinical studies, the top 3 includes coconut oil, which you can buy at your supermarket, which he discussed. And it's great for topical usage for salves. So you can just mix your plant oil, your Rick Simpson oil in, heat it up to a low temperature, melt the coconut oil and blend them together, and then let it cool back down. Easy way to do that. Any other tips?
Yeah, no, I tell people all the time, continue kind of any way you can. It's a great way to start again. It's all you can get is a little bit of flowers to grind it up with coconut oil and put it in a crock pot. Start to cook with it, start to rub it on your skin, start to put it in your mouth and let it just, ease into your gut and under your tongue, and you will find relief. Start small, go slow, but cannabis has a way of being very empowering, nutritional.
The endocannabinoid system affects your human system.
Right.
Your cell phone is breaking up, guys. Is your battery getting low?
Maybe. Is that better?
Yeah, much better. So before we go, we only have a few more minutes, and we didn't have a commercial break at the middle, so I don't know if we're going to hear the end of the show. So it should be ending in about 4 minutes, and we should hear the end of the show break, hopefully. Now, before that happens, real quick, I want to point out that there are many, many things you have to learn about the multifaceted layers of cannabis medicine, which includes cooking. She just mentioned it. And there are specific ways to make your own butters and oils. You can research the internet and find hundreds of ways. The simplest way is to grind up some delicious tasting flowers in a crock pot with oil or butter and just let it simmer for at least 2.5 hours. This will extract up to 80% of the oils from the plant, and then you can strain it with a cheesecloth. You can also just leave it all in there. It doesn't matter. It's 100% edible and delicious. But there are ways to make very high-grade butters, which you can learn also on the internet. You have to dry the herb, which is decarb it ahead of time. Then you do the boil directly in butter. There's a butter water system. There's many different techniques. But what I was getting at is we should absolutely set up an educational event for your return in early August. Is that going to maybe be feasible, and can we work it out here live in the last minute?
Yeah, I think we probably can. Let's look at it. Yeah, I think we're probably looking at the second week of August, and we would love to do that. I love to put on cooking demonstrations, and it was funny when I went to Illinois, there wasn't even cannabis on the market yet, and I got the Whole Foods to let me come in and teach them cooking to make canna butter, but I did it just by using other herbs and spices.
So you made other herb butter, yeah.
And but said, hey, this looks like it could be. It's not this much cannabis, but this is these other things. But it's great that here we can do that. When Michael did the Cannabis Film Festival in 2016, he had it at the Manitou City Hall, and it was wonderful because they came in and they blew butane in City Hall, showing that should be done safely. And I was just like, the police were the other wall away, and I was just applauding their willingness to just bring it there and be like, hey, the butane is the worst of this. The cannabis is the safe part.
So they actually made honey oil at the event.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Manitou Springs City Hall.
That's amazing. So the future is upon us. Cannabinoid research is the future. Can you touch a little bit on the International Cannabinoid Research Society?
Yeah, we'll be visiting. You go to icrs.org. We'll be there as participants this June. It's